Welcome to It's Good to Be Smart. I'm your host, Dr. Dave Mulder. I love to learn new things, and I hope you do too, because it's good to be smart. We know that living things come from other living things, right? In this episode, we're diving into the history of some important experiments that gave us evidence that this idea is true. Let's start with the basics. Biogenesis is the idea that life only comes from other living things. That means every plant, every animal, every bacterium, every living thing comes from a parent or some other kind of living source. Now that seems obvious, right? Well, for a long time people believed in something called spontaneous generation. This was the idea that life could appear out of nowhere, like maggots just forming on rotting meat, or mice appearing out of old rags. Scientists eventually proved this wrong, and that's what we're talking about in this episode. So how do we figure this out? Let's go on a little time-traveling adventure to meet three scientists who helped crack the mystery of where life really comes from. Our first stop is in the 1600s, where an Italian scientist named Francesco Redi ran an experiment to test spontaneous generation. At that time, people believed that flies magically appeared from rotting meat. Redi, however, was skeptical. He thought that flies were actually laying eggs in the meat, leading to the maggots that people observed. To test his idea, Redi set up a careful experiment. He took 3 identical jars and placed a piece of meat inside each one. One jar was left completely open to the air, another was sealed shut, and a third was covered with a fine mesh that let air in but kept flies out. After several days, the open jar was crawling with maggots. The sealed jar, of course, had no maggots, which makes sense. But, and this is important, the meat in the mesh-covered jar had no maggots, though maggots did appear on top of the mesh. This meant the flies were laying eggs on the mesh, not the meat itself. This was strong evidence that life wasn't appearing from nowhere. Maggots only formed when the flies had access to the meat. Redi's work was one of the first clear experimental challenges to spontaneous generation, though many people still weren't convinced. Okay, let's fast forward to the 1700s, where another Italian scientist, Lazzaro Spallanzani, took things a step further. By this time, people had been looking at all kinds of things under microscopes, and they called the tiny organisms they found microbes. Looking at food that was beginning to spoil, they often found microbes in the food. People still thought that microbes, or what we would now call bacteria, could spontaneously appear in food, especially in broth left out in the open. Some even believed there was some kind of vital force in the air that could generate life, like microbes. Spallanzani decided to test this idea with boiled broth. He prepared flasks of broth and split them into 2 groups. Some of his flasks were left open to the air, while others were sealed shut immediately after boiling. After a few days, the open flasks became cloudy with bacterial growth, but the sealed ones remained clear. No new life appeared at all. This showed that microbes in the air, not some mysterious life force, were responsible for the growth of bacteria. However, critics argued that sealing the flasks blocked that vital force, preventing life from forming. And so the debate continued. Now let's meet our final hero, Louis Pasteur, the brilliant French scientist who finally put an end to the spontaneous generation debate in the 1800s. He designed a very clever experiment using special glass flasks with long curved necks, kind of like a swan's neck. Pasteur filled these flasks with nutrient-rich broth and boiled them to kill any existing microbes. The long, curvy necks allowed air to enter, but trapped dust and bacteria in the bend, preventing them from reaching the broth. The result? The broth stayed perfectly clear. No microbes appeared. But when Pasteur broke the necks of the flasks, allowing dust and bacteria to fall in, microbial growth exploded. This experiment was the final nail in the coffin for spontaneous generation. Pasteur proved that life didn't arise from nothing, it came from other life. His work not only confirmed biogenesis, but also laid the foundation for germ theory, which led to huge advances in medicine and food safety. Before we wrap up this episode, check out these intriguing facts about the history of science related to these famous scientists. While Redi is most famous for his experiment with the meat and the maggots, he also identified over 180 different parasites that can make animals and people sick. He's also known as the father of parasitology. Did Pasteur's name seem familiar to you? Well, maybe you've heard the word pasteurization before. Louis Pasteur's work led him to develop a process of using heat to kill bacteria, and this process keeps food from spoiling. We still use this process today, and that's why our milk and juice stay fresh longer. They've been pasteurized. Check out the label and see for yourself. Pasteur's work with the flasks was incredibly successful. In fact, there are still some of his original flasks on display at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, and they have the same broth in them from the 1800s. And it's still sterile and bacteria-free. Want to make some soup? Understanding biogenesis helps us to know how life spreads and survives. It's why doctors sterilize their tools, why food needs to be stored properly, and why scientists keep studying life's origins. Life doesn't pop up from nowhere. It follows biological rules. So the next time you see a fly buzzing around, remember, it didn't just appear out of thin air. It came from another fly. And that's the power of science. Thanks for joining me for this episode, and nice work leveling up your brain power today. Remember, smart isn't something you are, it's something we become as we're learning. So keep listening, keep learning, and keep getting smarter every day. It's Good to Be Smart is created and produced by me, Dr. Dave Mulder, with the support of the National Science Foundation through the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. Subscribe to this feed so you'll never miss an episode, and check out our home on the web, goodtobesmart.com. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay curious, and keep learning, because it's good to be smart.